Welcome to our class on the law of restoration. I'm Gabonde Wasebe, Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Lodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado. And tonight we're going to go into the divan. We'll explain that in a second. The start of our meetings is always going to be with the recitation of the preamble. So let me pull that up. Okay. Chad, would you read the preamble?
We, the Moors in Morocco, the mothers and sons of Northwest Maximum, Northwest Alkebalan, the North Gate, and standing on our 5 points of light, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, in order to restore and balance order, just protection, reciprocal, wealth, and culture integrity for ourselves and our just sanguine heirs. Do establish this law of restoration for the organic state of Lodio Moorish Palladium Ante Colorado.
Okay, thank you. Now that's our preamble to our Constitution, our law of restoration. That preamble sets the stage for our mission, our purpose, our motivating force. It sets the stage for everything that AMPAC is about. It is the essential element from which we operate. So tonight we're going to focus on, yes, we are focusing, the Imperial divan and the provincial divan. I use the term Imperial divan because it is a term that represents our ancestors' thrust forward in developing government. And for centuries, thousands of years, the Imperial divan has been in place in our nations throughout the world. And what that represents is the three branches of government. You have an executive branch, you have a legislative branch, and you have a judicial branch. Now, understanding that, when you look at all the countries of the world today, all of them in some form or fashion have the Imperial divan expressing. Now this term, Imperial divan, is used in some of your secret societies like the Shriners and the Masons, the Egyptian order of some Egyptian orders and so forth. They use the term Imperial divan to describe their governmental structure. And so it's a very good explanation of what we've done. We're not creating a new wheel. We're not recreating something. We're using something that our ancestors used and developed and then passed on to others. And those others have proliferated with it, okay? And used it for purposes that we're not going to get into today. Now, when I talk about the provincial divan, it's basically the same. Three branches of government operating on ancient principles of governance, and bringing everything into focus so that we can have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches operating for the benefit of the people to bring together all of the pieces of government so that the people's needs are met, so that their rights are protected, okay? The modern focus of government is to protect people's rights. Centuries past, the focus of government was how best to subjugate the people and use the people to benefit the government. And oftentimes we see that operating in today's world, where certain governments are operating in the same way, to subjugate the people and make the people support the government by compelling them through force or making crimes out of basic human rights. Okay, so that's not what we're doing. So what we're moving with is the whole issue around human rights, protecting individual rights, protecting the rights of the nation, of the people as a whole, as an aggregate, and using these ancient principles to bring all that together so that our people are led properly, so that they're guided, so they're protected, and so that systems and situations and structures are in place to facilitate the people's creativity, education, the raising of families, and so forth. So let's take a look at this term, Imperial divan. Imperial divan, the word imperial we get comes from imperative or imperium, which means a command, dominion, an empire. So when we talk about the imperial divan or imperial anything, we're talking about that which gives force and authority to command, to exercise dominion, and to fulfill the edicts of the empire. The divan is a collections of writings, register, account book, board of accounts, custom house, dognata, in French, dawana, that was Latin, dognata, council, senate, council chamber, raised seat. So that's the divan, okay? Now, raised seat is different from these others. Raised seat is, a divan would be a raised platform upon which pillows and carpets would be set, that a potentate or a chieftain would sit, you see, and administer government functions from. So this gives you an idea of what an imperial divan is, okay? Let's take a look at another definition from the American Heritage Dictionary. Imperial, of or pertaining to an empire or emperor. They say obsolete, having supreme authority or sovereign. It's not obsolete because there are structures, international organizations, some states that are operating as though they have supreme authority and sovereignty over the people. Then you have the divan. In Muslim countries, a counting room, a tribunal, or public audience room, the seat used by an administrator when holding audience, a government, bureau, or council chamber. Okay, so the imperial divan is not only what is done in a chamber, but it is the actual chamber itself. Okay, now, when we look at the ancient governance, you have to go back to the ancient universities of Timbuktu and Cairo, and ancient universities in Seville and Cordoba. And the training, the education, the erudition that was provided was of such a sort that when one graduated, they were then oftentimes sought after by various sultans or emirates or other rulers of various kingdoms within the empire. And they would go and they would become part of the council to provide counsel to the ruler, so that the ruler would have wisdom behind decisions in order to administer resources, administer a population, administer trade, administer the religious activities, so that everything could work together so that the kingdom or the empire could prosper. You see, there was a time where a ruler's value was measured by how well the people were doing. We don't see that in very many places these days, but there was a time when that was the case. Now, there's another term here, imperial council. This comes from the Ottoman Empire, cabinet of the Ottoman Empire. The imperial council, or imperial divan, was the de facto cabinet of the Ottoman Empire for most of its history. Initially an informal gathering of the senior ministers presided over by the Sultan in person. In the mid-15th century, the council's composition and function became firmly regulated. The Grand Vizier, who became the Sultan's deputy, was the head of government, assumed the role of, let's go to the next, of chairing the council, which comprised also other viziers charged with military and political affairs, and to Qadi, askers, or military judges, the debtors in charge of finances, the Nisansi in charge of palace scribal service, and later the Kapudan Pasha, the head of the Ottoman Navy, and occasionally the Bey of Rumelia and the Aga of Janisarius. The council met in a dedicated building in the second courtyard of the Topkapi Palace, initially daily, then for 4 days a week. By the 16th century, its remit encompassed all matters of governance of the empire. Although the exact proceedings are no longer known, it was assisted by an extensive secretarial bureaucracy under the Reis ul Kutab for the drafting of appropriate documents and the keeping of records. The Imperial Council remained the main executive organ of the Ottoman state until the mid-17th century, after which it lost most of its power to the office of the Grand Vizier. With the Tazimat reforms of the early 19th century, it was eventually succeeded by a Western-style cabinet government. So there's been various permutations of a divan, a governmental structure, a governmental body, a cabinet. Those permutations you can see here as it's expressed took place over centuries, okay? That was from Wikipedia, by the way. So let's take a look at provincial. When we talk about provincial, we're talking about AMPAC, Allodium Mors Pradium Ante Colorado, a provincial state government under the existing and pre-existing sovereignty of the Moroccan Empire. The existing and pre-existing sovereignty of the Moroccan Empire. And the reason we say that is because the Moroccan Empire did not dissolve, it went dormant until recently when AMPAC had its elections and inauguration. And when we deposited with the Secretary General our declaration of statehood with our flag and seal represented. And subsequently, with our accession to the various conventions, treaties, declarations, optional protocols, and so forth, with the Secretary General, who is the depositary for all of these accessions to those documents. So as a provincial state government, we stand to raise the empire state by state. And I will have to say, there is a sister state forming. We'll be talking about that more, but they're on the west coast of northwest of Mexico, and it's very exciting. They had their first election on this past Monday, the 21st of March. They're having their inauguration on May 1st of 2022.
Oh, wow.
Did I say East Coast? West
No,
Coast.
you said West Coast.
It's West Coast. Yes. So that will be exciting. You'll hear more about that as you watch more of these videos. We'll be highlighting them and giving some more kudos and shout outs to them as well. So let's take a look at this word provincial, province, the district into which a country has been divided, as the province of Canterbury in England, the province of Languedoc in France, a dependency or colony as the province of New Brunswick. Figuratively, power or authority as it is the province of the court to judge of the law, that of the jury to decide on facts. Okay? So, when we talk about a provincial government, we're talking about a state within the empire. There are no documents that speak of the end of the Moroccan Empire. They speak of the restructuring of the Kingdom of Morocco into the Kingdom of Morocco, but not the end of the empire. Curious, isn't it? Let's go on. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's go right into the law of restoration and take a closer look at this. At the end, I'm going to go over what's on the board so we can take a better look at that as well. Now, let's go to the section. We've passed through all of these sections before, and so now we're at Article 1, the Wazir al-Rais. Now, the Wazir al-Rais is a term that we use in AMPAC to describe our, how do I put it, Prime Minister, the one who holds the chief office. This provincial divan is expressed in this law of restoration, shall include 3 branches of governance. Herein shall be covered the executive branch, while Wazir al-Rais shall be the title of the highest office in the government. This executive office includes a deputy, secretariat, as well as other offices required for the executive administration of provincial affairs. Okay, so every branch has its own modus operandi, so to speak, its own way of operating, its own functions, things that it has to do. The executive branch has executive authority over the administrative functions of the province, of the provincial state government. Because we are a state, we are a modern state, we're a Moorish state, okay? The Wazir al-Rais and the offices under their oversight shall be governed by this law of restoration. The executive office is afforded the privilege of being the supreme officer, spokesperson, appoints a secretariat, appoints ambassadors, addresses issues of national importance, and work with the Dalil Aziz for the signing and institution of bills which facilitate services focused on the well-being of the people. Now, this word, Dalil Aziz, is a term that we're not using it in its exact translation, but it does represent a council chamber, a council. In our use, the Dalil Aziz refers to the matriarchal council, a council of matriarchs, who is the legislator. But we're not into that yet. We're dealing with the executive branch. But I didn't want to run past this word without you knowing at least a little bit of what it was about. The Wazir al-Rais has the power to veto a decision by the Dalil Aziz if the vote is by less than 67 or 2/3 affirmative. Okay? So that's one of the powers that the Wazir al-Rais has. The Wazir al-Rais shall be constrained from using the office for personal gain, exercising undue influence, influence peddling, receiving emolument from a foreign power, receiving bribes, appointing offices not approved by the Dalil Aziz, issuing executive orders, and requiring personal oaths of allegiance. Also, the Wazir al-Rais is constrained from adding offices and executive departments without the approval of the Dalil Aziz. All officers under the Secretariat, elected or appointed, shall be held to this standard. Now, this is very important. This is a check on the executive branch. So that, this is the case with each of the branches. This is a check because human nature is human nature, and people make decisions for reasons that are askew sometimes because maybe they're under pressure and they don't know what else to do, and they might do something, and in the course of that, violating their own office. And so we have safeguards against that, and these safeguards are to protect the state, protect the nation from nefarious decisions, nefarious people, people that might want to come in and compromise a leader. Then if in doing so, some of this would be violated, and then checks can be done, and we can put things back in order. Okay, number 3, section 3 on this. Write your questions down. The requirements for being elected as the Wazir al-Rais shall be: the candidate must be at least 35 years old. The candidate must be a matrilineal national for at least 6 years. The candidate must have demonstrated competency in Moorish science and culture, Moorish chronology, national civics, as well as appreciation for the well-being of the people. The candidate must have lived within the provincial dominions for a minimum of 3 consecutive years. The candidate cannot be of subject status within any imperial provincial government. Okay? So these are the requirements. This is what has to be met. If a matriarch is going to be, if somebody's going to be the wazir al-Rais, this is what has to be met. 35 years old, matrilineal national for at least 6 years. Now in our case, we are 1 year old, a little bit over 1 year old. As a result, we didn't have anybody that was 6 years as an active Moor. So the person that was elected was the person that fit the qualifications that were needed. They were 35 years old. They had developed a degree of competency in Moorish science and culture, chronology, national civics, and so forth. They've lived within these dominions for at least 3 years, and they're not a subject of any other provincial government. So, we got our candidate, and we had our election, and they were elected. Section 4. Elections for the Wazir al-Rais shall take place 7 Shaban, 1442, March 21st of each 5th year, starting with the year 1442 or 2021. 1442 is the Moorish calendar, 2021 is the Gregorian calendar year. Inauguration for the Wazir al-Rais shall be on 19 Ramadan, 1442, or May 1st of the same year. The Wazir al-Rais cannot serve consecutive terms of office, yet they may run for the same office after a full term has passed, and they may only serve in the same office 3 times in one lifetime. That's so that we're moving the leadership around so that more Moors can become competent in leadership. So the positions you don't get into government and you stay in a position for life. You get into government and after 5 years, you move to another position. Or after 5 years, decide to take a break. And then later you come back if there's a position open and you're available and they want your services. That's how that works. Number 5, secretariat offices shall be appointed by the Wazir al-Rais and installed under oath immediately following election and confirmation by the Dalil Aziz. Executive branch offices, Deputy Wazir al-Rais, Dar al-Wazirate, which is translated as secretariat, non-elected positions appointed by the Wazir al-Rais. The Wazir of the Baitul Mal is the Moorish treasury. The Hajib, Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Qadi, deed tax assessor. Razim, Undersecretary for National Standing. Razim, again, Undersecretary for Trust and Estates. These are all appointed positions. Again, Razim, Undersecretary for Transportation. The Mufti, Consul General. Sutra, Secretary for Defense. Sharif, Enforcer. Nabi Tasawwuf, Secretary of Education and Spiritual Science. Wahi Laham, Mind and Heart, Secretary of Health and Family Well-Being. So these are positions that, if they're not filled, that we will be filling. Number 6, in the event the office of the Wazir al-Rais is vacated, either by resignation, impeachment, incapacity, or death, the following protocols shall apply. In the case of resignation and impeachment, the Wazir al-Rais shall have 30 days to finalize any and all pending matters requiring their attention. The 30-day period can be reduced to immediate dismissal with approval by the Sayyaraha and head Qazi. Now, Qazi, this is the first time you've heard that term. Qazi basically means judge. Okay, head Qazi is the chief judge. Okay? In the case of death or incapacity, terminal illness, physically debilitating condition, or mental incapacity, the line of succession shall apply. The line of succession is Deputy Wazir al-Rais, Hajib, Sayyaraha, Mufti, Sutra. The successor who fills the vacated Wazir al-Rais position shall do so for the remainder of the existing term. The position vacated as a result of the succession shall be filled by the appointment from the Wazir al-Rais with approval from the Dalil Aziz and the head Qazi. So the Wazir al-Riz has a right to choose somebody to succeed them, but only with the approval of the Sayyaraha and the head Qazi. So you can see the checks and balances that are always taking place here. So that's the executive branch, okay? The Wazir al-Riz. Now, this next branch, the Dalil Aziz, which is the matriarchal council. Now, I have to say this about the matriarchal council. I don't know of any other government that has a matriarchal council that is their legislative branch, okay? It is a development that we spend a lot of time talking about, we spend a lot of time meditating on, and through our understanding of our culture, it became a natural outgrowth of understanding the culture, because the matriarchal line is the line of succession for our consanguinity. It's the line of succession for rulership in many of your Aboriginal, indigenous, and ancient cultures. You see, so the matriarchal position is very important. Plus, to bring our provincial state government into line with the most progressive ideas, to begin to move away from the patriarchal progress and push against the people, it was necessary to bring in the matriarchal council to counter that. You see? So the matriarchal council is very, very important. Now, much of this is going to be a repeat from what you heard before, because you're dealing with elected officials, elected positions. Some of the things are the same. One, the provincial divan has expressed, as expressed in this law for its restoration, shall include 3 branches of governance. Herein shall be covered the Dalil Aziz branch. The Dalil Aziz shall have general oversight of all provincial government operations. Now, that's broad reaching. The Wazir al-Riz is the chief office, the spokesperson of the executive for all administrative functions. But if anything is taking place in government that is out of line, the Dalil Aziz has the right to stop it and say, stop. We have to evaluate this to see if it's in alignment with the Constitution, if it's in alignment with our principles, if it's in alignment with our preamble. They have general oversight, which means they see how everything is working together. If they see something over here that's adversarial to this over here, they can step in and say, you got to stop this. This is not serving the people. So they have that capacity, they have that right, they have that oversight. Number 2, the head of the Dalil Aziz shall hold the title of Sayyaraha and shall manage the administrative affairs for the Dalil Aziz. The Sayyaraha shall be elected as their first order of business by the Dalil Aziz body annually on May 2nd of each year. The election of the Sayyaraha shall be affirmed by the Wazir al-Riz and the head Qazi. The Sayyaraha shall be the determining vote in case of a tie. So there'll always be an odd number of matriarchs in the Dalil Aziz. The Sayyaraha will be the determining vote in case of a tie. Okay? Now, the Sayyaraha is elected annually by the Dalil Aziz body. The reason for that is that the position itself is a position that reflects the entire body. So it's not designed for a person to have that position for a long, long period of time. And then that Dalil Aziz body becomes just their political arm to exercise their will. So it has to take on a greater dimension. Section 3 here. The Dalil Aziz shall introduce, vote on, and present to the Wazir al-Riz for signature any and all bills which pass through their body. Bills for consideration may be presented to the Dalil Aziz from within the body, from the wazir al-Reis, and the Moorish nationals who are the body politic for the provincial government. So anybody that has a bill that they want to present, something that they want to present to government to be made into law, then that would have to go to the Dalil Aziz. The Dalil Aziz evaluates it and takes a look at it in relationship to its form, its substance, its impact, its consequence. And then, if it's found to be warranted or merited, then they'll put it to a vote, you see. The Dalil Aziz shall oversee and initiate, if necessary, impeachment proceedings for removal upon any executive, Dalil Aziz, or judicial officer who violates and abuses their powers in contradiction to this law of restoration. The Dalil Aziz members shall be constrained from admitting patriarchs into their ranks, using the office for personal gain, exercising undue influence, influence peddling, receiving emolument from a foreign power, receiving bribes, appointing offices not approved by the Dalil Aziz, issuing special interest bills presuming to confer civil rights, and requiring personal oaths of allegiance. You see, we have in here this idea, the constrained against issuing special interest bills presuming to confer in civil rights. You see, special interest bills are always a way to undermine the good of the whole for the benefit of a few, you see. Now we understand that people have unique needs and interests, but those needs and interests are not necessarily something that has to be legislated in order to deal with. Because in legislating it, it wedges into the fabric of the nation principles and ideas that maybe are not what the nation should be promoting. But over here, you have 10 people that need to have these issues addressed. So you address those issues. That's a different process of dealing with that, you see. Number 5. Okay. The Dalil Aziz shall be charged with overseeing the national trust. The Dalil Aziz members shall appoint 3 matrilineal nationals as trustees for the national trust, and those 3 trustees are then to appoint a manager of the treasury who shall be contracted to facilitate the accounting of revenues, reporting, and distributions from the treasury as per contractual obligations. Now, you heard in the executive branch it talked about the Baitul Mal. Words that just flew by. That's the Moorish treasury. This is not the Moorish treasury that's being talked about. This is the national trust that's being talked about. Okay? So the treasury of the national trust is contracted and given limited delegated authority to oversee the administration of revenues through the national trust. The Baitul Mal in the executive branch is there to administer administrative funds for government, you see, which doesn't comprise the entire treasury that's available for the nation. Number 6. The requirements for being elected to the Dalil Aziz shall be: the candidate must be a matriarch, woman by natural birth. Okay? The candidate must be at least 35 years old. The candidate must be a matrilineal national for at least 4 years. The candidate must have demonstrated competence in Moorish science and culture, Moorish chronology, national civics, as well as appreciation for the well-being of the people. The candidate must have lived within the provincial dominions for a minimum of 3 years. The candidate cannot be of subject status within any imperial provincial government. Okay? So these are the requirements. Now, as you can see, the Dalil Aziz is constrained from having any patriarchs in their ranks. So it's like if by accident a patriarch, a male, gets elected to the Dalil Aziz, there's something very wrong. And that person is not qualified. They would never be able to enter the chamber and take a seat in that chamber, because that's a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the law of restoration. It's a violation of the matrilineal code upon which we stand. Okay, let's go to number 7. Elections for the Dalil Aziz members shall take place 7 Shaban, 1442, March 21st of each 5th year, starting with the year 1442-2021. There shall initially be 5 legislative members, 2 of which are elected for 5-year terms, and 3 elected to 3-year terms. Thus, the Dalil Aziz shall have a staggered election protocol. Every 5 years, 2 members of the Dalil Aziz are elected to a 5-year term, beginning 1442 and 2021. Or every 5 years, 3 members of the Dalil Aziz are elected to a 5-year term, beginning 1445, 2024. The initial election shall have 3 members of the Dalil Aziz elected to 3 years term, and 2 elected to a 5-year term. That's so that there's a staggering. So you don't have the entire Dalil Aziz going out of office at the same time. So there's always a continuity. There's a flow. There's always a continuity. Number 8, the number of Dalil Aziz members may be increased as population and demand increases, from 5 to 7, 7 to 9, from 9 to 13. 13 shall be the maximum number in the Dalil Aziz unless so changed by a law of restoration convention. So in order to amend the law of restoration, there has to be a constitutional convention. Okay? Number 9. Oath taking for the Dalil Aziz shall be on May 1st of the same year. The Dalil Aziz members cannot serve consecutive terms of office, yet they may run for the same office after a full term has passed, and they may only serve in the same office 3 times in one lifetime. In the event the office of Sayyaraha is vacated, either by resignation, impeachment, incapacity, or death, the following protocol shall apply. In the case of resignation and impeachment, the Sayyaraha shall have 30 days to finalize any and all pending matters requiring their attention. The 30-day period can be reduced to immediate dismissal with approval by the Wazir al-Reis and Head Qazi. The remaining Dalil Aziz members shall vote a new Sayyaraha to fill the remaining term of the vacating Sayyaraha, who then must be approved by the Wazir al-Reis and the Head Qazi. In the case of death, incapacity, illness, terminal illness, physically debilitating conditions, or mental incapacity, the remaining legislative members shall vote a new Sayyaraha to fill the remaining term of the vacating Sayyaraha, who then must be approved by the Wazir al-Reis and the Head Qazi. Any Dalil Aziz member vacating office shall be obligated to the same protocol as the Sayyaraha. Okay. So you're starting to get an idea of the flow here. There's a continuity. It's a flow. When you're dealing with elected officials, when you're dealing with appointed officers, there always has to be standardized procedures for dealing with certain contingencies. And this is just the basic contingencies. As things arise, there'll be legislation to facilitate those contingencies and how we handle that, okay? So, the Article 3 deals with the legislative branch, which is here the Qazi. So in this third branch, the legislative branch, the elected officials,
judicial.
Dawood just edit this. Here we are at Article 3, the Qazi. The Qazi is the judicial officer, and the judicial officer is, there will be 3, but it can be as many as 12. We'll get into that. The provincial divan as expressed in the law of restoration shall include 3 branches of governance. Herein shall be covered the judicial branch. The judicial power of the provincial government shall be vested in one supreme court, hereafter known as the Darul Adul, with authority herein given to establish no more than 12 district Darul Aduls as population and demand require. Each district Darul Adul shall be overseen by a Qazi Darul Adul justice. As a new district Darul Adul is established, a new Qazi is added to oversee its function. Number 2. Initially, there shall be only 3 Qazi authorized to oversee and administer one Darul Adul, and as needed for 3 district Darul Adul serving the landed regions corporately known as Denver, Colorado Springs, and Grand Junction. No inferior courts or administrative tribunals are authorized. There shall be 3 Qazi to serve as judicial officers overseeing civil actions, criminal actions, family actions, consular actions, contract arbitration, estate disposition cases, and other procedural actions as required. Now, this is important because there are many Moors out in northwest of Mexico that are saying that consular court is the government. Consular court is one part of the judicial branch. It is one part of the court functions. The consular court is not, convened at all times. It is convened when necessary. And then the next case may be a criminal case. After that, there may be a family action. And then there might be a civil action. There might be a contract arbitration that the Qazi will have to oversee and administer and arbitrate. Or an estate disposition case, if there's a death of someone and they're trying to determine what is the condition or state of the estate and who's going to administer that and to whom, to what, how is it to be passed on, who does it descend to. So those issues are all taken care of in the Supreme Court, which also serves as consular court. Okay, let's go on. Article 3, Section 3. The Qazi, judicial branch members, shall be constrained from using the office for personal gain, exercising undue influence, influence peddling, receiving emolument from a foreign power, receiving bribes, appointing offices not approved by the Dalil Aziz, ruling against the Constitution, and requiring personal oaths of allegiance. Now, this idea of personal oaths of allegiance, this is an interesting thing, and it was something that we saw someone do in the last 10, 12 years. They were a governor of a state in the United States who was running as vice president. And it was discovered that in their state governance, all of their cabinet members had to sign an oath of allegiance to the governor. You see how that circumvents their decision making in relationship to what's best for the state. So that's why we have that in there. Okay? And of course, other things are pretty self-explanatory. 4. The requirements for being elected to the Darul Adul shall be: the candidate must be at least 45 years old. The candidate must be a matrilineal national for at least 6 years. The candidate must have demonstrated appreciation for Moorish science and culture, Moorish chronology, national civics, as well as the well-being of the people. The candidate must have lived within the provincial dominions for a minimum of 3 consecutive years. The candidate cannot be of subject status within any imperial provincial government. Now, the difference here is we're talking about someone being a judge, a Qazi, a chief judge of the Darul Adul, which is our courts. 45 years old. That means they've had a considerable amount of life experience that they could learn from. Matrilineal national, which means they are a Moor by their mother's line, their mother, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother, and so on. What else did I want to share? There was something else. Oh. The candidate must have, okay. It will explain it later on. There's another part I wanted to talk about. But let's go on. Number 5. Elections for the Qazi, Darul Abdul justices, shall take place 7 Shaban, 1442, March 21st of each 20th year, starting with the year 2021, 2029, 2035. There shall initially be 3 Qazi Darul Abdul justices, one of which is elected to a 8-year term, one elected to a 14-year term, and one elected to a 20-year term. Thus, the Qazi Darul Abdul justices shall have a staggered election protocol. Every 20 years, one Qazi is elected for a 20-year term, beginning 2021. Every 20 years, a Qazi is elected for a 20-year term, from beginning 2029. Every 20 years, a Qazi is elected to a 20-year term beginning 2035. Oath taking for the Qazi shall be on 19 Ramadan, 1442, May 1st of the same year. The Darul Abdul members may serve consecutive terms of office, and they may only serve in the same office for 2 terms in one lifetime. So if a Qazi is elected at the age of 45, they have 20 years, that's 65. If they want to serve again, they can. They can go till 85, but that's as far as they get to go. Okay? Now, technically, they could go longer. You see, as longevity issues change and so forth, they could be in their 90s and be a Qazi. Okay, let's go to number 6. In the event the office of the head Qazi is vacated, either by resignation, impeachment, incapacity, or death, the following protocols shall apply. In the case of resignation and impeachment, the head Qazi shall have 30 days to finalize any and all pending matters requiring their attention. The 30-day period can be reduced to immediate dismissal with approval by the Wazir al-Rays and Sayyaraha. A new head Qazi shall be chosen by the remaining Qazi after a new head Qazi is chosen with the Wazir al-Rays and Dalil Aziz's approval to fill that remaining term of the vacating head Qazi. In the case of death or incapacity, terminal illness, physically debilitating condition, or mental incapacity, a new Qazi is chosen to fill the remaining term of the vacated Qazi with the approval of the Wazir al-Rays and the Sayyaraha, and subsequently, the new body of the Qazi shall choose a head Qazi. So you see the protocols are similar as we go through each of the branches. Number 7. All nationals holding office in our nation must be under oath to uphold, support, and reflect the law of restoration for Lodimors Predium ante Colorado by working unwaveringly to assure that all laws, principles, and decisions are carried out for the good of the people. This oath shall be administered by the head Qazi. When the oath is for the head Qazi, the Sayyaraha shall administer the oath. So, that's your 3 branches in Lodimors Predium ante Colorado. We have the Wazir al-Rays, the Prime Minister, who is over the Secretariat, the executive branch. You have the Sayyaraha, who is over the Dalil Aziz, who is the matriarchal council. And you have the head Qazi, who is over the Darul Abdul, which is the justice system, the court system, and the other Qazi that come under that. So we have those 3 branches of governance that are in place to administer what is required for the well-being of the people, to give people protection for their rights, to give people redress, to give people a voice, and an opportunity to participate, and so forth. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about the National Trust. This is not something that's totally new to governance. Many countries have a national trust in place. And the United Nations makes provisions for trusteeship. Now, before I go into this, I just want to go into that with the United Nations. In chapter 11, no, it's chapter 12. Chapter 12 of the Charter of the United Nations, it talks about trusteeship for non-self-governing territories. Now, prior to February 28th, 2021, this region was a non-self-governing territory. After February 28th, 2021, which is when we ratified the Law of Restoration, we became a self-governing territory, a self-governing region, had our self-governing dominions. And we're moving at our level of development, our stage of advancement is progressing weekly. And so the concept of national trust is to replace the necessity of any state, or even the presumption of any state, to say that they have trusteeship over AMPAC. Because AMPAC has trusteeship over itself, over its own lands, over its own people, you see. So we are our own trustee of our own state, our own provincial government, our own lands, resources, everything else, all of that. So we have taken that step, which puts us in a position to interface internationally when it comes to trade and commerce, when it comes to international finance and other things of that nature. So let's take a look at this. We didn't go into a great deal of detail. The National Trust is a very detailed operation, very detailed in its documentation, and that can't be reflected here in the Law of Restoration. So, number one, the National Trust for the provincial government shall be established as an international, divinely established, sovereign or loyal express trust. Okay? The purpose of the National Trust for the provincial government is to provide for management, oversight, reporting, accounting for revenues, and distributions for and from the Treasury. Okay, these are the basic functions of the National Trust. The treasurer for the National Trust is in the capacity of general manager for the National Trust, with limited and delegated authority over the Treasury. The treasurer reports directly to the trustees for the National Trust. The Dalil Aziz shall choose and contract 3 matrilineal nationals who shall serve as trustees for the National Trust. These trustees report directly to the Dalil Aziz. So the trustees of the National Trust don't report to the executive branch, don't report to the judicial branch, they report to the legislative branch. The trustees are responsible for delineating the terms and conditions for the treasurer, general manager, agents, and contract workers. So if there's any things that need to be done within the context of the National Trust, the trustees are responsible for overseeing that. And number 4, the National Trust shall provide full disclosure as to all revenues and distributions, not of a personal nature, so as to protect the privacy, and to facilitate confidence in the government's ability and intention to fulfill its mission honorably. Now, the National Trust, the law governing the National Trust, is the Law of Restoration. So it's not outside using the law of another state for its delegation of authority. The delegation of authority is the Law of Restoration. The plan for revenue management through the National Trust, as revenues become available, from 100% of revenues in a given period, either monthly, quarterly, or biannually, as the trustee shall see fit. The revenue shall be distributed as follows: 10% to be contributed to various Moroccan Empire development funds which support Moorish erudition, provincial government development, Moorish housing, and Moorish family support. 10% to remain as reserves in the treasury. 40% to be used for governmental management. Now, as you looked in the executive branch, there is a position called the Baitul Mal of the Moorish Treasury. The Baitul Mal would also oversee this in relationship to governmental management. And then the last 40% to be distributed among the registered Moorish nationals from the prior accounting period. This may also include those of patrilineal national status, yet their amount would be half that of a matrilineal national. Okay? The accounting method used for managing the accounting for revenues and distributions shall be simple debit and credit accounting, no double entry accounting. Now, the reason we have that in there is that double entry accounting is actually a system of theft. It is a system of accounting that was used by a mafia boss in Chicago. And when the feds came in to raid them and go through their books, they found this unique accounting system, and they adopted it. So double entry, it's double books. You see, you can do anything with the books if you decide to, and we choose not to do that. Debit and credit accounting is sufficient. 5, any and all allodial claims to lands within our dominions shall be held in allodial, aboriginal, paramount, clear, perfect title. The National Trust shall be the first lien holder on all lands claimed allodial by the government and by the Moorish nationals. The National Trust, via the trustees, shall liaison with the Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to facilitate the conveyance of claims and titles required for movable and immovable assets. That encompasses everything. Whatever assets that is chosen by the National Trust to administer on for the well-being and for the advancement of the nation, then that's the assets. The National Trust, in conjunction with the Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs, shall facilitate the claims on abandoned lands within our dominions. Now, this number 5 begins to set the stage. You begin to see the scope of what we're dealing with. We begin to facilitate claims on abandoned lands within our dominions. That's just one basic level, okay? The National Trust will be facilitating a lot more. You'll see in a couple of seconds. Also, the National Trust and the Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs, shall establish protocols for interfacing with foreigners who are residing in our dominions, parcel by parcel, to facilitate amicable and equitable taxes and revenue. Okay? Now, our decision to assess taxes and fees or fines upon the foreigners it's not our decision. It's like, okay, that's what we would like to do. But in our study, as we become more erudite, we have discovered that that's our mandate. It's in the Treaty of Act of Algeciras. It says that we have the right to fine, to assess taxes, to assess rents, to do all of those, transfer taxes and so forth. That's what we're to do to build our treasury. We've been told that within that treaty, that that's our prerogative. The Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs, shall operate on behalf of the National Trust by asserting our right of review, oversight, and approval or not for developments within our provincial dominions. Now, what gives us that right is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Indigenous people have the right to reclaim and make claim to their lands, their Aboriginal, Indigenous, autochthonous lands. And as such, any developments on those lands have to be approved of by those people. that are aboriginal, indigenous, autochthonous to the land. So that's our prerogative as well. That's our duty as a government. Following the rules of international law, we shall step into that and take our place among the affairs of men. Number 7, money, currency, fiat, Federal Reserve notes, private commercial paper, and cryptocurrencies are all forms of exchange used in trade and commerce. Money is gold and silver coinage. 1 troy ounce of silver, 1 troy ounce of gold, also broken down into smaller ounce denominations, are for the full payment of all debts. Currency can be any commodity used and agreed upon by the trading or commercial partners to use to consummate trade and commercial intercourse. Fiat is a term used to describe all other forms of money, currency, besides gold and silver. Fiat is counterfeit due to the fact that it is only valued by the consent of the users, having no intrinsic value by its own merit. Federal Reserve notes are bills or notes of exchange issued by the Federal Reserve to be used for the revenue, accounting, management, and taxation upon the United States citizenry. This is the common form of exchange instrument used in Northwest New Mexico, North America. Private commercial paper is any form of negotiable instrument used to satisfy obligations in trade or commerce. These obligations can be represented as bonds, bills of exchange, promissory notes, deeds of trust, letters of credit, debentures, as well as investment instruments such as stocks, bonds, commodities, currencies, and securities of all types. Cryptocurrencies, electronic currencies, blockchain, and all forms of electronic currency exchange mediums are new to the environment of international trade and commerce. These currencies are primarily used by countries that have chosen a corporate as opposed to a sovereign status. A loaded Morse Prairie Monte Colorado shall reserve the right to use real money and currency as described above in order to facilitate the required trade and commerce agreements and arrangements for the provincial government. A loaded Morse Prairie Monte Colorado reserves the right to coin, mint money as needed. Okay? Now, we're going to stop with the reading of the Law of Restoration here. Okay? I could go on, but I don't want to do that. It's too long. Okay? So, let's go back up to our preamble. Preamble. We the Moors in Morocco, mothers and sons, Northwest New Mexico, Northwest Alkebulan, the North Gate, and standing on our 5 points of light, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, in order to restore a balanced order, just protections, reciprocal wealth, and cultural integrity for ourselves and our just sanguine heirs, do establish this law of restoration for the organic state, Lodium Mors Pradium Ante Colorado. That's the organic state. Now, I go back to the preamble because everything that I read, I know it's a lot. It was a lot. It's just sort of washed over you. Okay? This is why all of that was written down, so that we could fulfill that, you see. We're not just throwing things out there and hoping they stick. We're putting things out there that we know are substantiated by international law, by common law, by ancient jurisprudence that our ancestors laid down. Okay? Let's get to what's written on the board. What's written on the board, I want to go to the boxes. You know, we like to deal with boxes. We know that there are people watching this video who are going to think about establishing a provincial government in their region, or who are in the process of doing that, okay? They will need to establish a constitution. We call ours the Law of Restoration, a provincial divan, which is our 3 branches of government. Once we signed and ratified the Law of Restoration, we immediately did oath and allegiance. Actually, we did it all on the same day. We did our oath of allegiance and we signed the Constitution. We had elections within a month after that, on March 21st, 2021. Now, elections are very important. There is in international law, according to certain United Nations codes and conventions, self-assignment is frowned upon. Self-assignment is someone saying, I'm the emperor, or I'm the king, or I'm this and I'm that. And then they begin to form a structure around themselves, and they appoint people to do this and do that. That's self-assignment. That is not government. That does not build a state, you see. So the elections are very important because elections tell you what the term of office is. It tells you what you can and cannot do. It tells you where you are on the chain of command. It tells you what mandate you've been given. Okay? And then, of course, your nationality documents. The nationality documents are taking place all throughout this time. And they're going to change. They're not going to be the same because you're going to learn more about nationality documents. Don't apply. Because the nationality documents have to represent the state that you have pledged your allegiance and oath to. Then your inauguration. A state will have to have an inauguration, a public inauguration, to announce to the public, these are the officers of this provincial state government. And they are receiving and being administered the oath of office. We had our inauguration May 1st, 2021, at which time the Sayuraha administered the oath. Well, all the officers that had been elected administered the oath upon the Sayuraha. And then the Sayuraha administered the oath upon the head Qazi. And then the head Qazi proceeded to administer the oaths for all the other officers. So we created that chain and we did it properly. And that's very important. And it needs to be made public as a video. Put it online. Have it on your website so people can see who are the officers. Did you go through this process? Did you reference your Constitution? Did you show your flag and seal? Because if you didn't show your flag and seal and you did an inauguration, it's incomplete. And if you don't have the documents upon which you place your authority to make that oath, it's incomplete. So what we did, we put together a tome, T-O-M-E, a tome of documents that goes back to ancient times of treaties and law documents and so forth from 1446 BC all the way up to the present, including our law of restoration. We put them all in a tome, it's about 8 inches thick. We put our hand on the tome, and by the law of the ages, we made an oath to uphold AMPAC. Okay, and then the national trust. Now, many of you are thinking, well, I can just set up a trust and I can do this and that. It's much more complicated. It's much more involved. It takes a lot to facilitate that and to administer that. So you have to understand it and you have to learn it. There are many resources out there. You can contact us through the website if you have questions. We're available. But remember, checking the boxes is very important. Don't go to the next step unless you completed the step before. This is where we get mixed up. We want to rush into things. Don't do step B until you've done step A. And don't jump to G until you've done C, D, E, F. Or else you're going to be up a creek without a paddle. So what we want is all the Moors to have this knowledge, all the Moors to have an understanding that the Constitution is essential for statehood, that the Constitution must cover what is essential for the officers to operate, what's essential for us to begin to pull together a nation so that a nation can be strong and support the people, and protect the people's rights, and reclaim the people from the clutches of those that have them in subjugated status. And that's what we're doing. So with that, I want to say thank you for watching this video. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn, to study, to review. You can find this document on our website, ampacgov.org. Okay, and it's available to everyone. You'll also see documents that we have acceded to and accepted in the United Nations, various charters, not charters, but the charter itself, conventions, declarations, covenants, and so forth, that are now part of the law of AMPAC. You see, you follow the instructions. It's all there. Thank you for watching. Peace.